Hello, my name is Jason Ankin and this is my vlog channel. Today's video is going to be about learning. So this is really a video centered around learning how to learn basically. It's really interesting that most people will actually go their whole way through the education system and they will be taught a ton of different subjects, but they'll never actually be taught the process of learning, the learning process itself. I find this very odd, it's very unusual. So yeah, if you want to learn something, you have to understand there's a process to it. And it's really important because the majority of time when most people start something new, they end up giving up before they've even gotten any degree of proficiency or any skill. This is something that I work as a gym instructor, and normally at the end, if I'm doing like a gym induction with somebody, at the end of that session, like when I've taken them through the gym, I've showed them all the equipment, I always explain to them, be patient and take your time, because learning how to use all of this equipment is complex. Learning how to use all of the equipment within the gym, there's a science to it, and it requires that you actually learn all of the skills. And it's one thing that I've noticed working in the gym is that the individuals who are most consistent long term are the individuals who have the most skills in the gym. Basically, they know how to use the gear, they know how to use all of the equipment, they know how to use all the weights, they've got all of the training strategies, etc. They know all of the techniques, and they'll be in training 5-6 days a week, no problem, simply because they have the knowledge to do so. What I've noticed is the individuals who are inconsistent and the ones who give up are the individuals who have very little experience and very little skill. They have very little skills, they don't know the techniques, they don't know the training strategies, etc. and they'll end up giving up. When you have, for example, again in the gym, when you have all of the skills, you have no excuse not to, because you know how to use all of the stuff. So learning can actually be viewed as a process, and you move through different stages. There's two models of learning that I know, and they're very similar. In fact, they're pretty much identical apart from one stage. I'm going to use a model which is called the four stages of learning competency. Now there are four stages to learning. The first stage is called unconscious incompetence. The second stage is conscious incompetence. The third stage is conscious competence, and then the final stage is unconscious competence. Now this creates a continuum, moving through a continuum from complete ignorance to getting to the point where you can do something so that it's second nature, something that you can do without thinking about. Now the first stage is called unconscious incompetence. That just means, essentially it just means you're unaware that you don't know something. It can be described as being blissfully ignorant. Basically for example, if you've never heard of the 4 stages of learning competence, then you were actually in this stage in relation to this process because you've never heard about it. So you were, before this video, an unconscious incompetent in relation to the 4 stages of learning competency. The second stage of learning is conscious incompetence. You're now aware of your incompetence, basically. So now all of a sudden, if you know that there's this thing called the 4 stages of learning competence, you're now aware that there's something that you don't know that you have to know. And during this stage, this is almost like it can be seen as a more cognitive stage where you actually have to think, ask questions. What does he mean by this? How does this work? Etc. It's more sort of a questioning back and forth where you're trying to sort of understand the process. The 3rd stage, conscious competence. This is where you actually start to develop a certain degree of skill and proficiency at whatever it is that you're trying to learn. And in the final stage, unconscious competence, is basically where you're so good at something that you actually end up, it is second nature, basically. So if you take this 4-stage learning process can pretty much be applied to any new skill that you learn or any new piece of information. There's really 2 sort of sides, 2 sort of things you can learn, or 2 sort of types of things that you can learn. The first one is just raw knowledge. So this is something you know intellectually in your mind. And the other thing is basically a skill. It's something that you actually do. So if, for example, if we let's take you through a process of, let's take you through the 4 stages of learning with learning a skill. So for example, I did martial arts. Now if I had just, one of the sports that I used to do was grappling, and it was very, very technical. Now the whole premise behind the grappling was to basically make your opponent submit. You're trying to make your opponent tap out. And they would make you tap out by putting a joint lock or a chokehold on you. Now if you didn't know about the type of technique that they used on you to make you submit, you were unconsciously incompetent, and hence why you got beaten. After you've submitted to their technique, you may turn around to them and ask them, what was that? How do you do that? And this is where you instantly transition through the first stage quite quickly, because you've just figured out something that you didn't previously know exists. So you've just learned something that you didn't previously even know existed. And then instantaneously you transition into the next stage and you start to question, how did you do that? What is that technique? I want to know how to protect myself from that next time. And then what will happen is 9 times out of 10 the individual will probably show you, oh, this is what I did, here's how you do it, etc. And then you will go off and go, okay, I'll try and learn that. And you may practice for a couple of weeks, couple of months, learning the different technique. And then eventually, when you come up against that individual again and he tries that same technique that he beat you with previously, you know how to defend yourself against it because you've practiced the defense to the technique that he previously beaten you with. And then you will have transitioned into the 3rd stage, the conscious competence. You will have developed a certain degree of proficiency. Now, if you keep grappling with the same guy over and over again, he might catch you with the technique a few times more. Sometimes you'll defend it, sometimes he'll beat you. But eventually, over time, the more and more you practice, the more and more you rep this process, eventually what will happen is that you'll be able to defend this technique every single time that he tries to do it against you. And then you will have entered into the 4th stage, and that is unconscious competence. You don't even have to think about it. You know what he's going to do. You know how to defend this many, many different ways. And basically, that's the final stage of learning. Now, this sort of process can be extracted out and pretty much applied to anything. The main problem that I see with people is basically it's harder in the early stages of learning than it is at the end. And that sort of resistance that people experience, I always describe it as sort of being like it's sort of like being in sticky mud. The early stage of learning is a very sort of a very uncertain, unsure place to be in, and most people will actually give up in stage 2 because they just can't get past the conceptual idea of it, and they may not have the time, effort and energy to practice the thing, and they may just give up. And you'll probably be able to relate to this in some way, shape or form in your life. You know, something you maybe took up before, and then you've decided, you know what, I can't be bothered with this. It's too much work. You come up with a whole host of different excuses, etc., etc. But in reality, you just not moved through the second stage of learning. You just, because it's so difficult, it's so sort of, it's so sticky. There's so many sort of things you have to get right before you can start to move into the third stage, which is more proficiency, and then it takes even more practice still to move into the final stage. Now, the reason why it takes time is simply because you're trying to restructure your brain. Learning new habits and learning sort of new skills actually requires you to rewire your physical brain, and you just have to be patient. It takes time to do that, because you're literally rewiring a physical structure in your head. Once those pathways have been built, over time it just becomes more proficient, to the point where you don't even have to think about it. Now, I'm going to teach you also 4 methods that you can use to basically, my dog's playing with his toy. Yeah, I'm going to teach you, he's learning right now actually how to play. I'm going to teach you 4 methods how to actually move through these 4 stages of learning quite quickly. I'm going to teach you a method for each stage. So, the first method I'm going to teach you to move through unconscious incompetence is to study. Now, you can do one of 2 things. You can read books, or you can watch things like documentaries or interviews or stuff like that. And what these will do, this will give you an insight into different parts of life, different things that exist that you might not know of. The only way you can actually know whether you don't know something is by learning things that you've never actually learned about. Too many people are sort of aversive towards certain subjects, and they therefore limit their understanding, they'll limit their skill set. Now, once you've, so that's the first method: study, do research, watch documentaries, watch interviews, just where you're exposing yourself to a new piece of information. Watch videos like this here, the ones that I'm putting up here on a day-to-day basis. Watch these type of videos, because they're going to be teaching you things that you might not have learnt before, and that opens your mind up to new areas that you might be interested in, that you might want to dive deeper into. Now, once you've found something that you want to learn, or something that you want to take up, the next method that I recommend that you do is to mentally rehearse whatever it is that you're about to learn. So start to use your imagination, start to think. If you're trying to learn a new skill, you can actually use the practice of visualization to rehearse this practice in your mind before you actually do it. Or alternatively, if it's trying to figure out something like a theoretical thing or new information, just use your imagination to try and play around with that idea. What does it mean? How does this work, etc. So that's the second method. Use your imagination. Think about the process. That will take you through the second stage of learning, the conscious incompetence stage. The next method of learning that I recommend is isolated practice. Now, this will take you through the third stage of learning. Isolated practice is basically taking the thing that you're going to learn, isolating it by itself, and practicing it over and over and over and over again until you develop skill and proficiency at it. For example, if you were to do martial arts and you were to learn, in my situation, if I was to learn a new grappling technique, I would isolate that technique by itself. I would have a compliant partner and I would practice that technique over and over and over again until I can get the movements right. The fourth method that I recommend is, this will take you through the fourth and final stage, the unconscious competence stage, and this is what's called varied practice. So varied practice is taking the thing that you're aiming to learn and practicing it in as many different situations as possible. Again, if we use the example of martial arts, if I was looking to learn a specific submission technique, my goal would be to practice that on different opponents in different levels of competition. So for example, sparring, or maybe sparring with the juniors, which is really easy, or sparring with somebody at my level, or sparring with somebody who's better than me, and just constantly trying different variations, different various ways of practicing that technique. So you can see, and this is those are four methods you can use. The first method is study, research, get someone to tell you, get someone to show you something that you don't know. The next method is visualize in your imagination, try and think of different ways that you could do it. Then thirdly is to isolate it and practice it in isolation, and then finally do varied practice, so practice it in as many different various ways as possible. Now that's pretty much it. Now what's really important about learning is it's a principle of human behaviour. Humans by nature are learning machines. That's basically what we're really good at. We're the best learners in the world. So it's really important that we understand how to actually learn, because especially in today's day and age, there's a whole load of new stuff coming in, and it's coming in constantly. It's coming in faster than we can actually keep up with. So it becomes very important to understand how to actually learn, so that we can apply that process to pretty much anything that we want in life. You can't really ever be successful at anything without going through a learning process. And this is an absolute statement, meaning that you absolutely cannot be good at anything at all without going through a learning process. Every single person that's ever achieved anything in life, no matter how small or no matter how large, has had to go through a learning process. And in order to learn this learning process, to actually learn how to learn, another thing that I recommend is just do new things all of the time. Challenge yourself. Don't limit yourself. Constantly aim to learn on different levels. Learn things to improve your mind. Learn about your emotions. Learn about your behaviour. Learn about things like how to improve your social life. Learn new skills. Learn new information. Just do new things all of the time. Take up a martial art. Take up a sport that puts you into an environment in which you're forced to learn. And then once you're in that environment and you've learned something up to the point of being unconsciously competent at it, you've developed it up to the point of second nature, deconstruct the whole process backwards, and you will find what I've told you is pretty much on point. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today. So yes, my name is Jason Ankin. This is my vlog channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.